Good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 102, and we're joined by a very special guest. I'm very excited for this conversation because this is the first Indigenous activist that we've had on the Kiko's Freethinkers Forum on our official YouTube channel. Tanda BluBear is an Indigenous activist. I think she's based out of California. We're going to talk a lot about her own personal backstory and how she got involved in Jasmine Sherman's campaign. She's also the founder of an organization called Women with Bows, and we're going to talk about that some as well. And she does a lot of activism work that I'm interested in. And we're also going to tie in the land back policy with the Sherman BluBear campaign and how that relates to other issues around this 2024 presidential campaign. And BluBear and Sherman are both running under the Green Party and Unicorn Party banner. And this is for the office of President of the United States. For Sherman, and the vice presidential candidate with me right now, Tanda BluBear. And I just want to say welcome to the show, Tanda. And we can't wait to have this conversation with you. And thanks for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And before we get started, just a slight ad. I have to get that in. We're a very small YouTube channel now, even though we're growing, we're independent, we're truly independent. And we mean that. And we just say, if you like the content, subscribe for free. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a little bit of your time to expand your mind. And remember, you can't unthink free thought. We have quite an international audience. 43% of our audience is located outside of the United States. And so that's kind of the point, is to make this an international community forum. Global perspectives, local perspectives, national perspectives, all of it. I think you have to have everything together. You just can't be in one avenue or the other. You kind of have to have a well-rounded thought process. And again, I'm very excited today because this is a podcast of culture and politics. It's not just a political YouTube channel. And so I think people miss sight of the cultural aspects of the YouTube channel because they see the political content and they just automatically assume that's one thing, but it's really an all-encompassing experience if you really give us a chance. And if you do like us, again, subscribe for free and tell your friends and family to do the same thing. We need all the help we can get. I'm not asking for any of your money, just a little bit of your time. And really, this is Tanda's first introduction to not the world of YouTube, because I've definitely seen videos of Tanda on YouTube, so I'm not going to tell that lie. But as far as an official interview, it would be such. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk with Tanda BluBear today. Give my audience kind of your vision, the world that you grew up in, and you can spend as much time as you want to tell my audience your story.
Hi, my name is Tanda BluBear. I am Pomo kashia of California, on so-called California, Stewart's Point Rancheria. When I was young, my mom was running from abuse and got picked up by the church, and then the church decided to sell me to a white Christian family without her permission. Luckily that sort of backfired in the way of my adopted mother, who decided to keep my culture within me and taught me and raised me in the most traditional way that she knew how to at that time. This is back in the 70s. So all the knowledge that she had and she could get her hands on, she made sure was passed on to me. She wanted me always to know who I was and be able to stand up and fight back if necessary. And so that kind of led me to, at some point, I think in my high school and then my young adult years, I sort of pushed away from that. I didn't want anything to do with being Indigenous, because there was a lot of racism that was put towards me because of it. A lot of people said horrible things about Indigenous people, and the world around me wasn't very forgiving. And so because of that, I pushed back for a great while, and it sort of led me down a path of destruction. The home that I grew up in, other than my mother, was extremely abusive. And when Native children are adopted into white families, a lot of times the culture is taken away immediately. My saving grace was my adopted mother kept reiterating the things that my adoptive father was trying to take away. And in this family, I was shamed for being Indigenous. My adopted dad would call me Dirty Indian a lot, and would often refer to me as the disappointment, my birth mother's disappointment. and things like that. So I grew up with not a lot of self-esteem, I guess, and not a lot of pride to be Indigenous, I suppose. That didn't come around until I was a little bit older. Once I got older, I think it was um, Christopher Columbus Day, and there was a protest on it, and my mom took me down to the protest, and we just stood on the side and sort of watched. That's sort of where I started to go, oh, this might be something that I might want to do. That was the proudest as an Indigenous person that I felt growing up, even though my mom kept trying to be like, you need to be a proud Indigenous person. Like it's good to be Native. Like, and I just didn't believe her. That was my mom. I didn't believe you. And I went to a predominantly white school, and so I didn't see kids that looked like me. And then my dad and that was putting me down, and I don't know why it is, but the human psyche will hold on to the negative longer than the positive for some reason. And so that was sort of my life, and for a long while, until I think it was in a garage one day. I'd slipped back into well, actually, I got pregnant, had my daughter, and she brought a lot of pride to me. I wanted to raise her in an Indigenous way. So I raised her in an Indigenous way. And I was still trying to find myself at that point too. And everything. I knew who my biological family was at this point. We had a relationship at this point. So these things were starting to heal, and this was starting to bring where I felt proud of my indigeneity. And so I raised my daughter in this way, but when she was like 18 or so, or like almost 18, I slipped back into the bottle. My brother had taken his life and stuff, and so I was going through a time, and I slipped into the bottle and drugs and stuff. And I'll tell you what, the movement for justice, Indigenous justice, saved my life. I can't say it enough. I heard I was getting ready to take my own life, and there I was sitting in the garage there, and just had made peace with it too. I was leaving the world, and my phone was on the other side of the room, and I remember all of a sudden my phone popped on, and I heard it was on YouTube, I guess, and I heard somebody talking about what was going on at Standing Rock. And I heard I think the words that I heard was, it's a combat zone at Standing Rock against Indigenous people. And that sort of woke me up and brought me back. And I looked on that, and I knew I couldn't just leave out into the world the way that I was. I needed to be in a good way. I needed to get clean. I needed to get sober. So I actually packed a bag and hiked across the United States. This was the start of how I ended up in the justice movements, many different justice movements. This hike took me through Indigenous movements. This hike took me through the Fight for Black Justice movements. St. Louis was popping off at this time, and all of these things. So I got a good introduction into it, and it's just where I found my life. This is where I found my own self-worth from where I was. And so after this journey and stuff, I stopped, and where I stopped was in Flint, Michigan, during the water crisis, which is still going on, by the way, in Flint, Michigan. And we're always praying for the citizens of Flint, the true Flintstones and everything. So, but the more I got to know people there and got to learn more about what the corrupt government that was in play and that was going on, the corrupt money that was being passed around, the real reason as to why the water went bad and all these things, I started to get way more involved, because my role in the different movements that I did across the country, up until this one point, were pretty much trying to stay invisible at the back of the room and just learn, and I was really working on my sobriety and things like that, and trying to find my way to myself, trying to, basically, it was do or die for me. It was do or die. You're either going to do this thing or you're out of here, like you got to find some sort of reason. And so the movements for justice, all of them, in unity, I wouldn't say there's one over another. All of the movements for justice and the many beautiful people that I met along the way, and learning the different struggles of different marginalized peoples in different areas, not just my own, but other areas, that really started to give me a reason to be here and to fight and to continue on what I was doing. And so after Flint, I became way more active, and I started to speak up a lot more. And so at different rallies and things like that, But I always felt like there was something more I needed to be doing. And so we created Women with Bows. I've stood everywhere from the border and the children in cages to Black justice, Indigenous justice, the water, the land, and everything in between. And the thing that I noticed about everybody was that we're all struggling the same enemy, and it's that the very top. It's that government. It's that machine that we're all fighting, and we're not being heard. And it's desecrating not just our land and not just our water and resources, but it's desecrating our hope as a people. And just not enough was being done. And I thought, something needs to be done. And I always knew about the homeless crisis that was America. And we created Women with Bows mainly because we wanted to go to impoverished Indigenous reservations and things that were the most impoverished. So like the reservations that had like the most rural areas where say like aid couldn't get to or wouldn't go to, things like that. And we were boots on the ground, so we didn't mind taking out a sled and putting on our boots and walking into places where vehicles couldn't get to and stuff to take supplies in. That was really important. But on our journey doing these things, we would stop in the cities outside before we would get to the res and stuff, and sort of regroup everything and get ready to go in. And we realized that the need out there was just as great as the need within. And so we started to service the different towns that we would be in and cross in before we went into the reservations. And we would reach out to places like interfaith and stuff that had food banks and stuff, and we would put in time with those food banks, and they would load up our truck and stuff, and so that we could take it in. And so it was a sense of community, and I really liked that. And so we went even further with that, and we just decided that we were just going to do like people in need, like no matter what it was, we were just going to be there for people in need. And then when we were in California, and this is when there's a self-governed homeless encampment called Camp Resolution that was going on in California. We went over there, talked to a few people, and they said, come down to the city meeting. So we started going down to the city meetings, and we started to realize that promises were made that weren't being kept to the residents of Camp Resolution and stuff like that. And so we realized that, that's not okay. So we started going in to interrupt their land acknowledgements first, to let them know that land acknowledgement without any action is nothing. And then we would do we interrupted their Pledge of Allegiance also, because no, justice for all hasn't happened yet. No, we're not going to let these empty words fall on the general public. It's not the truth. And so we started standing up in that way, going, you're not telling the truth. You're not keeping your word. You guys ran saying you're going to do this, and you're not doing these things. And these are human beings. It was really about getting the general public to understand that these are human beings. We're all human beings. We're not resources. We're not just a number. We're human. And so that was sort of our interaction with Camp Resolution for a while. And then we kept taking aid into there. So we would take them water and supplies and things like that. And we started to get to know them on a very personal level, and started to fight and walk with them on their journey to becoming self-governed. And they did it, which was amazing. And then we just started to service the around areas, because in California, 80% of Sacramento, where I'm from, it's illegal to be homeless. And so we have an epidemic in California. We have an epidemic right here at the capital of California. And so we decided to start servicing that area. And also, whenever we had the funding too, we would leave and go across the nation. And the main reason why we stood in the water movement, the land movement, on the border movement, Black justice movements, when we stood with this and unhoused movements, all of this, when we were standing with these things, we did it because of humanity. Because in every single one of these areas, what we noticed was that humanity was the number one culprit. It was lacking humanity. And we were all fighting the same machine. And so when you come and you start to see that one factor, and you go, wow, there's two things missing here, and you go, wow, they're the same thing. Okay, now how can we take it a step further? Which is where sort of Jasmine and them come in. Is we were in Minneapolis, where they're fighting. There's a camp organizer, Nicole Mason, and she is leading. She's organizing Camp Nanokazi, which is an indigenous homeless encampment in Minneapolis there, and they're fighting their city government as well for these resources to happen to get everybody housed and all this stuff. Well, when we were there, We realize that this is a battle. This is going to be a battle, indigenous or not. It's always going to be a battle until you could take food out, you could take water out, and that's great, and it's greatly needed. But the thing is, we wanted to make more of an impact, and we just kept thinking, how do we do this? Like, how do we make more of an impact? I felt like we're not taking care of the people in the way we need to take care of the people. The issue is just growing out of control. And when we go to these different cities and stuff, we're seeing that fentanyl is an issue, and we're going, gee, who makes that? Gee, who's putting out that? Oh, same culprit. And so we just go, okay, there's something bigger we need to be doing here, because we got the same culprits that are contributing to all of these issues in this country. What's the next step? And it just so happened that Jasmine's people reached out right as we were questioning what is the next step. And it's just like, for me, I believe in creator. I believe in the universal power that connects us all together. And so I believe it was that universal power that connected Jasmine's team and I together, swung back around and was just like, hey, I actually put out a video. I don't know if I even told Jasmine this, but I put out a video because I was thinking, it's not just the Democrats or Republicans running. I'll show you a couple third parties that I had just seen pop on my For You page. And somebody at Jasmine's team was like, hey, I need to meet with Jasmine Sherman or see with Jasmine Sherman. And I hadn't heard of Jasmine at that point. But Jasmine kind of wrote a snarky comment and was like, they always leave us out. And I was like, who's they? And I was like, I got to know who this is. So that's when I started researching Jasmine, and I really started watching Jasmine's page and just kind of listening too, because we had some indigenous people that were a little concerned that Jasmine wasn't bringing up land back and wasn't addressing it. And so they were like, just watch her, and I when I saw Jasmine and the things that I was hearing Jasmine talk about were very humanity-based things. They were what this country needs. They would address the most pressing issues in this country. And so I think I was across the states, and I think I actually wrote them, and Jasmine had said, yeah, I think her team reached out again or something on one of my posts, and I was like, I would like to meet with Jasmine. So we set up that meeting, which I think I canceled a few times because I was just busy, and we were working, and I couldn't help it. But when we finally did talk, it was a good talk. And it was about, well, I've kind of heard that, like, you're not talking about land back. And Jasmine said, well, I'm not indigenous. So, like, I feel like if we're going to do a land back policy, it needs to be an indigenous land back policy by indigenous people. That made sense to me. And I was like, that was enough for me. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, that's awesome. And so yeah, that's how it sort of all began. Like, that's where we started, and it's been a real blessing. And I've learned a lot from Jasmine and their team, and I hope they've learned a lot from us and our team. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I really like the policies that are put forth.
Okay, so there's a lot. I really appreciate you going into your story too. That's so important, I think, for the audience to keep in mind. Uh, we're talking about, yeah, technically it's a presidential, vice presidential campaign, but these people come in with a lot of stories and a lot of experience and a lot of heartbreak and good things, bad things. You have to consider everything coming in. We just don't show up, running for president, vice president of the United States, and not have steps to get us to that point, and revelations and activism background and everything. You have to focus on all of that, and so that's why I love to ask that question to people, because we all have different backstories. And the cultural aspect of this campaign is really intriguing to me, because as someone who is a professor who teaches about culture and language, I'm automatically interested in anything that deals with culture, because I think it's underemphasized, not only in the education system, but the way we treat other people. Culture is kind of pushed aside. We always talk about everything else but culture, I feel sometimes. And then they use these excuses about, especially the conservative minded people, they almost use culture as a way of turning it on its side, but they don't even address actual culture. Everyone has identity, and identity is always going to be important. And they like to muddy the waters and combine it with this political, like this propaganda and whatever. And that's not what culture really is. I think if people actually took the time to listen to other people's backstories, they would appreciate culture more and not jump to these conclusions that we used to seeing, in the mainstream media. And really, it's just a sideshow to me. I'm not interested in any of that stuff at all. I could talk about the Pomo Nation, for instance, all day long. I want to get to a couple of things that you brought up when you were describing yourself. Um, are you so do you automatically become a member of that nation, the Pomo Nation, for instance? How does that work? Because you say you were adopted by a white family, right? So are you
But
automatically, do you still have the tribal affiliation regardless of that?
I know my birth family as well.
Okay. And you're part of what nation? Just out of curiosity?
Pomo, kashia.
Pomo Kashia, and that's located in California.
Yes, right on the coast of California.
Okay. And do you know like the language features, like anything like that? Like, are you pretty much connected with the Pomo Nation?
Well, I mean, yeah, I know my family.
Yeah. Because I know it's different for every person, and I think it's important for my audience to kind of understand that. I guess what are some of the things that the Pomo Nation go through as far as the fighting against the state, for instance? Because you mentioned the so-called state of California. Like, what issues for my audience who may not know much about indigenous culture? What are some of the most prevalent, pressing issues that the Pomo Nation faces, for instance?
I think we're fighting just like every other tribe for the desecration of our land to stop. Like Pomo people, and if you just go to the res, you'll just look up my res and think, what a beautiful place, you know. But you're not hearing the fight. The fight is that's happening up in Jackson Forest in the redwoods. We're always fighting the government. They always want to take what we have and then make a profit, and they always come with some excuses about that's not what we're doing. We're doing it for the benefit of everybody and all this, and we're whatever, and we're just cutting these trees. But when you go look, they're cutting down some of our most sacred trees, and they're stomping all over our sacred grounds. And I think you can find this across the United States. It's a very intertribal thing. The government stomping on our sovereignty for one, and then stomping on our lands. It's like they just sort of go in and take whatever they want. You know what I mean? And so I think we're fighting that. We're fighting that, and then also MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, two-spirited people. We also, it's such an epidemic that we have a MMIR, which is missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, because it's not just our women, our girls, and our two-spirits anymore. They are at a higher risk than any of our other relatives. But we're having our men coming up missing all the time now. Um, this is a problem, not just for Pomo people, not just for Yurok, Miwok, or anybody, the other coastal tribes here. This is a problem across the entire United States that hasn't been addressed in a way where everybody can understand that this is an issue. It is such an issue that we have whole movements addressing this issue. And so I think those are some of the things. And then also the education of the missions that happened here in California. The part that the church played in our lives, these things happened in my lifetime. The church stole my mother, and then
Mhm.
there was a money exchange for me. And so these things are important to remember, and we're all trying to get up and heal from these things while the government's still attacking the lands, the places where we go to pray, the places where we go to be community, and these things are still under attack. We're still having to fight for our lives in 2024. That's ridiculous. And we're still fighting for justice for our children. We're still fighting to get our women home so we can give them proper burials. We're still fighting for everybody's right to life through water. I mean, the list goes on, and these are issues that are facing every tribe. It's not just one or the other. We could say what's specific to the Pomos, the redwoods right now. The redwoods are very specific to our fight right now. But what the bigger issues are is land justice. We have to have land back. We need land justice, and then we need justice for our women and our relatives. We need justice for the waters, the salmon. We need justice, just justice. And I don't think in 2024 we shouldn't still have to be fighting this hard. And as Indigenous people across Turtle Island, we're all still fighting this hard. And so I don't think that's just a Pomo issue. That's an issue across the board, all over Turtle Island. And so, yeah.
You're absolutely right. And that's something I'm really grateful for when I went into my program at UT Knoxville, my PhD in Spanish, because I work with Black writers, Indigenous writers, LGBTQ writers. But the thing that was a consistent point that came up with my dissertation director was the struggle with Indigenous people in the Americas. Because when I use America as within the context of North, South America, Central America, the Caribbean, all of it. And anywhere you go in the Americas, you have issues with land and indigenous cultures. Like it's like that in Brazil, in areas where the predominant culture is indigenous. The government is still trying to take over the land. They still succeed taking over the land, and they use multinational companies a lot of time. They work with the multinational companies to do this or whatever, and they try to justify it to extract whatever natural resources may be there. And it doesn't just tie, like you said, to Pomo Nation specific, but this goes into other issues too. You talk about environmentalism, all these environmental people, they talk a good game, but you're there at ground zero. Like you know, you basically live that. You know exactly, you see it up close and personal what the government is doing. And it sounds like from what you're saying, you may even not have had a different political introduction than most people because um, I didn't hear much about Democrat, Republican, all this mess. I heard more so the government is doing this to everybody, regardless of where we are. And something else that you mentioned too that I think is important, and this is where the people who are into politics, I think, need to really take a step back because I think you can be too political in the sense that you believe that politics is supposed to be a certain way and you're supposed to be like more of a suit and tie class. And I think that's the way U.S. politics is very much a suit and tie. Everyone is so worried about their appearances. They're so worried about, oh, how's my family structure going to be for people across the country to accept me, all this type of crap. And academia is the same way. There's this person that's hiding behind this system that you're engulfed in. You're engulfed in a system. They say to you, educate the people, but you're also hiding your identities. You're hiding your methodologies. You're hiding your experiences that you grew up with to sort of conform to this academic system and teach a certain way. Like it's the same thing that you're describing. And one more thing I would add is that the whole idea of California being this left state, Tennessee being a right state, all this crap is another tactic that's used by the ruling class and the government. As far as I see it, and it took me years to realize this, thankfully my dad kind of educated me earlier. There's really the blue and the red political machines working together. It's always been like that. Whether it's in California, the blue political machines in certain areas, or the red political machine. If people see it more in those terms, you start to debunk this whole idea of these two parties being so different. There's no difference between the parties really. It's really they're in lockstep with the government, all their policies, and their interest is making money and exploiting everybody else. They're not interested in helping anyone. And so when I hear people like Jasmine and yourself talk, it gives me like hope in the political system that we have these voices that aren't interested in the corporatism that we're so accustomed to. And I urge my audience to look outside of the two parties. Like absolutely, there's if you 102 episodes in and you don't see that there's a common link between the corruption of the red color or the blue color, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we're 102 episodes in, and I I can't tell you any other way. I mean, we've had amazing guests on that have described these mechanisms in completely different ways, but it's all the same conclusion. It's the government working with these two factions or whatever, and they successfully co-opted the country, having us fight against each other when we really need to be fighting against them.
Exactly. Exactly. I tell people that a lot. Like our indigenous elders, they always say, um, the Democrat and Republican parties, they're just wings, right? It's why they call them the right wing and the left wing. But a bird only flies when both wings are flapping, okay? And so what like I try to educate people on the Democratic and Republican parties and just say, listen, if they did care about you, we wouldn't have poverty. If they did care about you, no one would have price gouged during COVID. If they cared about you, this would have been dealt with by now. And I let people understand that, like, listen, um, if we're too afraid to vote outside of the left and the right, you really have to step back and ask yourself, who has convinced you that you should be scared to vote outside of the left and the right? Because I'll tell you who, the left and the right, that's who. And then we always tell them too, they play good cop, bad cop. Yes, they function together. They got us into this mess together. Because see, if they didn't, then we'd be somewhat out of this mess. But you see, the Democrats are running everything now. We still in this mess. And the Republicans were running it before, and we were still in this mess. Like we ain't been out of this mess. This mess is only getting worse. This mess has been made with the Democrat and Republican Party. This cannot be fixed by the Democrat and Republican Party. The abuser cannot be the healer. This is what I tell people. And the thing is like this Democrat and Republican Party, they're all wealthy. They do not care about us because I'll tell you something. This whole homeless crisis, this doesn't have to be here. This doesn't have to be in this country. They could solve that. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is they won't. Neither party will. And most people in this country are one paycheck away. I would say 65% of this country is one paycheck away from being on the street themselves, from not making it, from not having food in their pantries. I mean, we're there now.
Mm-hmm.
Homelessness is at an all-time high right now. This is ridiculous. Most Americans are, I heard this on TikTok, this saying, but it's true. Most Americans are condiment rich. They're grocery poor, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what we can't feed ourselves on that. But the government knows that. They don't care. The government can feed themselves. They go to lobster dinners and steak dinners and they don't care. And they don't care because it hasn't hit them yet, because they're at the top. You see, I bet they'll care when it's the middle of summer, it's 120 degrees and their air conditioner don't work and they ain't got money to go travel anywhere. Then it becomes an issue what they care about. And this is why I tell people, like, when you look at us, Jasmine and I, okay, we're real life people. We've been through the struggle. We've also been outreach and I've talked to personally thousands of people in the struggle, different struggles across the United States. We're one of the people. And I'm not trying to be anybody else than one of the people. I'm going to be who I am. And people are either going to vote or they're not. They're either going to vote for change or they're going to vote for everything to stay the same. And that will give them another 4 years on TikTok to make a platform out of the things that they're dissatisfied with. And until they take accountability, things ain't going to change. Like if we want different, we have to do different, period. Like that's just it. I've talked to a lot of alt-right people and have put in the time, even if it's 2 hours sitting face to face across from a table talking to them, to try to put it in different ways so they can understand it. And then at some point I've had some that go, oh shit, yes. Who's told you that guaranteed housing doesn't work? It's people in mansions that don't have to worry about it. They want you to believe it's not going to work so that you'll keep voting against your own interests. That's what they're doing. And so what we're doing is, you guys think these are such radical ideas. These aren't radical ideas. Everything in Jasmine Plan is like basic humanity. It's taking care of the basic needs of human beings. That's not radical. What's radical is believing that the 1% somehow has your best interest at hand. That's what's radical. That's crazy. That's ludicrous. Come on. And so it's about getting people out of that haze, that blue and red haze, that these people who have been in office for a long time are somehow going to come along and save you all of a sudden this year. They're not going to. If they were going to, they would have done it already.
Mm-hmm.
We're ready to start moving on day one.
Hmm.
Jasmine has a plan to end homelessness by 90 days. Like, come on, that we have plans. We don't just have words and promises. We have plans to do that. And like we keep telling our my indigenous communities and stuff, like we have plans for land back too. You know,
Hmm.
and maybe the whole world isn't going to understand it, but if we're ever going to stop genocide across the seas, we got to make things right here because the blueprint was made here. So we have to start to correct here what's going on so that it's not normalized globally. And that's what happened when people were allowed to ignore what happened here. What it did is it allowed the normalization of this genocide to wrap around the world, and that's what we're seeing across globally.
I'm glad you mentioned, as far as the campaign, you're right. We've had two great conversations with Jasmine, in depth about a lot of the policy positions by the Sherman BluBear campaign. And but there's one that we could talk about for sure where I think you really come into play, and that is land bank. Because on Jasmine Sherman's site it says our campaign is still drafting the land bank policy. And so I would like you to kind of tell my audience specifically, what exactly does land bank mean, like to my audience who is completely new to this, and what how would this administration expand on land back, and as far as like you always hear about treaties, I hear about this all the time, restoring like the original treaties, but what exactly does all this mean to my audience?
Lambic, I will explain a little bit about Lambic because I know a lot of people get really like nervous when they hear Lambic. They think we're just coming and we're going to kick you out your home and tell you to get on the boat and we're sending you back to wherever you came from. And that's just not the case. That's not the case at all. Right now we are in the process of building a Lambic policy. The reason it has taken a little bit of time to do is because we need a lot of different tribal voices on board. I can't just do this policy myself and assume that I know all indigenous nations, because let's just face it, I don't know all indigenous nations, okay? But I do know a lot of indigenous people that are ground warriors that have been active in the water movement, the land movement, the treaty movement, all these different things, culture keepers and whatnot that we have on board with this right now. Part of land back is deconstructing the entities the government put in place that basically were put there to keep us continuously oppressed, such as the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That will be dismantled. That will be abolished. We do not need it as a people. The BIA needs to be held accountable as well for the atrocities that they did. They're the ones who put a price on our head and allowed people to go out, scalp us, and bring the scalps back and pay. That was all the BIA. And the BIA has been a thorn in a lot of our sides for a very long time. They also the government installed dual citizenship, which as individual Native people, we should be able to pick our own citizenship if we want to have dual citizenship, or if we just want American citizenship, or if we just want tribal citizenship, period. That's our choice to make. And then as in tribal nations, we also deserve the same thing as tribal nations. We deserve our own autonomy. We deserve to be able to make these decisions. And with the BIA looming, we don't have any right to any of that. The BIA determines, the BIA says. There's been two times in history where the indigenous nations have actually got up on their feet, have been economically sound. We have been food sovereign and everything else. And then the government and the BIA come through and they make all these laws to make sure that we don't get very far. And so they outlaw everything and then just tell us what we can have, how much we can have, when we can have it, where we can have it, and all this stuff. And that is not good, because one of the times that we were completely up on our feet, things were running really good. That was there in the plains. And I believe it was Lakota people. I'm not 100% sure. Please don't quote me on that. But it was in the plains there. And they had themselves all the way economically sound. Everything was going good. They were self-determination, because we have that whole self-determination thing, right? Except for the government doesn't actually let us have that. But when the government did, we were up on our feet, and America was suffering a depression. So the first thing the government did was, oh, we can't have them up on their feet, let's take it all away. And so they started to make those laws to limit our growth, which goes against the Self-Determination Act. There's just a lot that they've done to place a boot on our neck. Let's just put it that way. And the thing is, like, we're not just fighting for us. And that's what a lot of people think. We're not just fighting for us. We're fighting for everyone. When we're protecting that water, we're not protecting it for just us. Those waters run through the whole country for everybody. So when they frack out our waters, I know there's a lot of racist people sometimes that will say, like, so you get what you deserve, because I've been told that so many times. But the thing is when that water goes toxic, it ain't just my water. That water goes into every American home in this country. We are protecting that for everyone, not just us. If we can dismantle some of these systems that have basically deemed us powerless for anything, and we can actually get a seat at the big table, where I actually think that Jasmine Sherman's policy on environmental and infrastructure policy, that policy puts Indigenous lands back in Indigenous hands, which is healthy. And I'll tell you why. Because what it does is, right now, okay, so if you own a house right now, right, and you want to say build a swimming pool back in the backyard, you got to go through your city, your county, whatever, and you got to get the correct permits. Okay, so land back in that aspect means that instead of going to your city or whoever to get your permits, you're going to come to that tribal board for that area, which is the tribal people of that area. That's who you're going to get those things for. Not too much would change, other than the tribes will now have a say. Goes for the pipelines and everything else too. And so that allows us to better protect you and everybody else. It allows us the stewardship of the land. A lot of people, they believe in scientists, but some of our elders and knowledge keepers have the knowledge that surpasses science by at least 10,000 years. I mean, we've been screaming this at the hilltops. You can't do this to our water. These are the things that are going to happen. Our ancestors, before the colonizers even got here, we have stories of them talking about this time that we're in right now. And so for me, land back right now looks like abolishing the BIA. It looks like Indigenous lands in Indigenous hands, meaning that Indigenous voices have a seat at the table. It means that we are the last stand. We're going to approve or disapprove projects that may or may not be harmful to the client, to the climate, to the people, or to the resources. That's important to remember, because a lot of people think it has to do with, like, just get out of your house, give me your land, and I'm sending you on a boat back to England or wherever you came from. It doesn't have to do with that. And so I could probably go better into more detail once it's all the way built. I know what I want to see in this policy, but I do have a whole bunch of people that we have to run these things through and make sure before we make a concrete decision, because this really is a group policy. This isn't just my policy. We're going to be incorporating the voices of people who started the American Indian movement. Just so everybody knows, like, the American Indian movement back in 1899, Russell Means went to the Senate and gave a solution, and they just snubbed it and didn't do it because it said abolish the BIA, give us a shot. But the government doesn't want us to have that much power. We can get up on our feet. We can help others when we can help ourselves. And the government doesn't really want to see that. And my people want to see that. And it's about listening to other tribal people. There's a lot that's going to be put into this land back policy that's very exciting. We have a really amazing young man that is in this, that's been in this policy meeting. He knows so much about Native law and how it partners with US law. And he's brought up some major points that we are looking deeply into. And he's kind of going to be our consultant along this land back policy, just to say, yeah, you can do that. No, you can't do that. And even he says the first thing first is the BIA has to be abolished. Like that's just a given right there. And that, for anybody that's listening, is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And if you look up the history, you will be quite shocked at what this government has been allowed to do, continue to do, and not ever be held accountable for. The UN actually, the UN, the USA has 5 counts of genocide on it against indigenous people, and nothing has happened since the UN made that judgment. And so we're prepared to make things happen. It's going to be better for everybody, not just my people, but all people. It's going to be better. It's going to allow us to heal. It's going to allow us to flourish. Self-determination is huge.
The crazy thing about you discussing the Bureau of Indian Affairs is that I live in Tennessee, right? And they even not have they said Bureau of Indian Affairs, U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, Nashville, Tennessee, Smyrna, Tennessee. Like it's crazy. They have offices all over the place. I did not know that. That's crazy to think. But going into what you were saying, I have a question for you, which I don't know if I know the answer to this, but I'm asking you the question. But it's going to tie into something else that I want to make as far as a point. But Jasmine identifies as a socialist. Do you identify as such?
I like, let me say it this way. I'm indigenous. I don't identify with the United States governing body or system. I am into humanity. If you want to call that socialism, call me a socialist. But I believe that everybody deserves the right to shelter, to food, to healthcare, to the education, because I think that's all self-determination. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I believe in humanity. And so if that makes me a socialist, that makes me a socialist. But up until now, I haven't like identified myself with all these little titles that all the political parties want to put on me. I've had enough titles put on me as an indigenous person in this country. I've had all these opinions and assumptions put on me already. And the only thing I'm really trying to do is get justice for the wrongs that have happened here so that it can start to lessen the atrocities that are happening around the world. I am here to, I think that food is a human right. I believe that shelter is a human right. I believe that access to clean water is a human right. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to make sure that people are taken care of. And part of my language, but I'm here to make sure that people are given a shit about. I'm here to make sure that the truth comes forward, that we can actually, like how Jasmine says, reset. It's time. This system ain't working. Of are you this, are you that? If I fall into socialist, I fall into socialist. If I believe that universal base income is the answer, then call me a socialist. I believe in humanity. I believe in healing. I believe in equal pay. I believe in all of the things that are categorized as socialist, it seems. Actually. Now that, yeah, because I've been asked this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if a socialist leads with humanity, then call me a socialist.
Yes, it's crazy because this goes to a very early conversation in this development of this channel, this YouTube channel, with a personal friend of mine. And I was basically saying, um, where is it that healthcare? We talk so much about like what do people need to get through this world? Um, you need water, food, shelter, everything that you've talked about, and somehow they've made that a bad thing, and then they put that label on it. We haven't said one thing about Karl Marx. We haven't said anything about any sort of theory. We're talking about everyday experiences. The same. We all have to wake up in the morning and do this stuff all over again, rinse and repeat. We know what we need each day to get through each day. Um, housing should be a right. I don't know why people think that's a controversial statement. Um, I totally agree with what you said, and it kind of debunks. And this is directly to my friends who identify as libertarian. I identify as a libertarian, but not the free market type libertarians. I mean, even though we've had some of those people on, but even with the free market type libertarians, there's a lot of overlap in the language that the Jasmine Sherman campaign is using, the Chase Oliver campaign is using, and people act surprised. And I tell libertarians, I don't know what perception you had of people on the actual left. I know I've been a leftist my whole life, and I'm not talking about this fake blue Democrat shit. I'm talking about someone who believes in those same principles of education being a right, health being a right, all this stuff, clean water. Um, I don't know why that's a controversial thing, like you were saying, but you all in your campaign want to get rid of a lot of governmental programs too. And people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked." So you're calling them something. I don't know what idea you had of socialism coming in, but there's a lot of overlap. If you gave it a chance, that's probably a possibility that you could work together as opposed to demonizing other people just because you don't think it fits into your box of libertarianism or whatever it may be. I think the best chance for someone outside of the duopoly to succeed is to have coalitions across the board, but to not argue. I was talking to Chase about this yesterday. Like, we got to stop this arguing stuff like a commie, this or that. I mean, even people who are attacking like the capitalists. I mean, I understand it because I don't agree with that philosophy. But at the same time, I think there's a way, even for people who aren't capitalists per se, to like maybe connect with those people, communicate with those people in a different way to where it's not so toxic. Because there's so much that we do agree on as far as getting rid of a lot of these government institutions. But I think that debunks a lot of myths because they hear like Jasmine wants to get rid of those institutions. Yeah, the same shit that the same the FBI, all this stuff is basically just a way to, you know, condemn the people, oversee the people, govern the people, but not in a way that needs to. Like, why do we need something like that anyway? We know what we need to get through each day. We don't need these extra governmental bodies. Um, if we had governmental bodies that just make sure, hey, I have food on my in my house, I have a great education. Like if you had covered just the basic needs, that should be it. Like you don't need all this other stuff. And I think that's a great message. And I think that's the message that your campaign has been using, because you are a wide coalition. You're not just reaching the people who are quote unquote leftists. A lot of the stuff that you're saying should be able to connect with anybody in the country, honestly. And so I think if we saw it that way, we need to really take steps back and get away from the labels because they are very dangerous. And I've had to realize that myself over the years that the labels have been a big part of the problem, honestly. Because if you talk to people and you strip down the people, you can have a real conversation and you understand, like, wow, like, why was I thinking about that person in that kind of a way in the first place? And so I think that's a great thing that your campaign is doing. And that's why I bring on third party candidates and activists because um, I think that there's a lot of great ideas, even with the people that I don't agree with within the third party movements and stuff. I think is anything is better than the red blue stuff that we go through right now.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And for me, most of my work on this earth has been humanity based, making sure that people have the necessities, what they need. Um, and that's how I'm running too, because I'm not going to change. I'm not going to try to fit into some political box or some political label. I'm not going to hate one group of people just because they're not in my party. I refuse to do that. I'm not going to do that. I take a lot of time with people that with opposite views. A lot of times, especially in person, when they come up to me and want to tell me about their opposite views and how wrong I am, I like to just get very personal on just a human to human level. And I've talked to several Trumpers that are not Trumpers anymore because we took the time to sit and talk. And I went over it and over it and over it till I wanted to pull my braids out. And finally, the bottom line was, listen, I want you to ask yourself, who has made you believe that like basic human needs being taken care of by the government is bad? And then you do see the light come on and they're like, holy crap. Yes, it's the government that thinks that. Because see, the thing is, an uprising of the people, right? It ends the elite's way of life. And that's what people don't understand. People don't understand that the elites are playing their game on the table. And we're the thing holding the table up.
Mm-hmm.
We're all bent over, it's on our back. And all we really have to do is be in unity when we stand up. If we're in unity when we stand up, that topples the entire table. It ruins their way of life, not ours. Not ours. It betters ours. And that's what they don't want. You see, the ultra rich and career politicians and all that, they're ultra rich too. Us uniting and moving as one body and in one motion, it topples the system. It deems them unnecessary. When we the people on the ground, when we can dismiss harmful and dangerous organizations that are put together by the government and reorganize and build new, healthier ones that envelop equality and equity for all, then we'll have justice for all. You'll see crime drop. You'll see drug overdoses drop. You'll see the number of suicides drop. You'll see hate crime drop.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money in all the things I just listed. That's why the government keeps us divided. That's why the government doesn't want us to stand up. That's why the government wants us to think equality can't happen, and why the government wants us not to believe in it and to be fighting constantly. We're fighting over their right to have more money. That's what we're doing. When we're picking left and right, we're just going, oh, this is who I want to have even more money. But
Mm-hmm.
yet we're still struggling day to day to make our damn bills. And this millionaire or this millionaire, who are we all voting for? No, let's change this whole thing up. Let's start voting in our best interest as people, as human beings, because guess what? The government has the money. We have seen it recently. They have the money. How much do they send to Israel?
Oh gosh, yeah.
They have the money to take care of us. The Dene Nation, which is more commonly known by Americans as Navajo Nation, they don't have running water. And this government in the United States doesn't believe it's their problem. Um, it's their problem because before they started screwing with stuff, everybody had water. And this is what I try to tell like right wingers too. Free healthcare isn't a handout. You see, it's something you earn because the government has destroyed all the resources. These are government issues why you have to go to the doctor. They were started by your government, why you got to pay for them. Tell me about why you got to pay for them. And education, from an indigenous point of view, education should be free. And I'll tell you why. It was forced on us. It's not real education in the grade schools and high school. All that is assimilation. They either want a worker or a soldier, and that's it. They aren't setting you up. We are not the highest in education anywhere. I'd like to see that change. But we need to go to the higher education, or we're going to continue to get screwed over. You see, my people fought for that, fought to get in their colleges once we were forced, and to go into their mission schools. We were forced to do that. The survivors that made it out fought and protested to get into the upper level school because we knew that that's where the power really was. That's how we could be. And my tribe has beat at the Supreme Court level twice. And so there's knowledge is power. It should be free though. It shouldn't be just for this group of people. No. Give everybody the same give everybody the same amount of cards. Let's see what's happened. That's how you change the game up. You see, we want a more free, a more equal world to live in. The United States, we have the money to make sure that the citizens of this country are okay. We have the money to start honoring treaties. We have the money to bring equality and equity to the playing field. The thing is, the two-party system doesn't want you to have it, so they're not willing to do it. And they're gonna bellyache about, oh, we have to do this, and oh, we're so in debt with that, and oh, this. Look at how much money they sent to Israel. Imagine what they could have done with that here.
Oh
And
yeah.
what's happening in Israel, people need to understand too, that genocide that's happening over there is almost play for play exactly the genocide that happened here. And so it doesn't surprise me that the United States is funding. It was the United States. It was America's blueprint. Hello, they're just supporting their blueprint, their product. That is their product. That is the product of the Americas. Genocide. And if we want it to stop, like I said, we got to know where it was created, and it was created right here. That's what land back does. It starts to deconstruct all that so that the genocide that wraps around the world also stops, but it has to stop here first because of history, because of how it started. Over in Israel right now, you got the Israeli government trying to sell off land plots of Palestine, but they're only selling them to Jewish people. That happened here. That's how a lot of people here have your land and houses. It's due to the fact that we had something called a land lottery that happened after our genocide, and that land lottery was where land was given away. The BIA has given to non-Indigenous people lands as little as $41, just as long as we couldn't have it. You see what I'm saying? And that's exactly what's happening over in Israel right now. What the next step is, they're gonna just watch. The next steps are not good, and we could stop this. We can stop this machine. But in order to do that, people need to understand the history. In order to do that, justice needs to happen. And part of that is abolishing the BIA. A part of that is education. Part of that is we're still here. And it'd be nice if Americans knew that. And I'm running just as much for my people as I am for all people, and mainly the next generations that are going to come, that have been born, Gen Z and millennials have been born into debt with no natural resources practically that aren't being destroyed or will be destroyed in the next 15 years. Like,
No, oh guys, this is we could keep going on and on and on. This has been an unbelievable episode, 102. Um, I definitely want to have you back on if you would be willing to come on to our show. Um, but I feel like I've learned so much from you today, and I know my audience will too. But I want to give you like a minute or two to maybe give any shout outs, or to if you have any final words for my audience. And Tanda, this has been again another great episode, and we can't wait to have you back on.
yeah, I just want to give a shout out to We're Dropping Two Bulls, who's helped us so much. She's my campaign manager, and she's amazing. The whole Sherman administration, which have been absolutely fantastic in teaching in areas that I needed to learn from a little more, like technology. And yeah, just everybody who came before me, you know, Russell Means, Leonard Peltier, like all of these names, they came before me, and I'm really grateful. And the Pomo people, Pomo elders, and just everybody who's in it for change. I shout out to y'all who are in it for change and in it for unity. I shout out to all of y'all who are trying to be more human every day.
And do you have an official website for your organization? Um, that
Uh,
you
Women with
mentioned.
Bows.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's womenwithbows.org.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm including all the information into the episode description so my audience has access to that. And I clearly link Jasmine and your official webpage onto as far as the presidential, vice presidential campaign too. Um,
Awesome.
I again, this episode will be released tonight, and so you can share it with your audience. And I know people will be thrilled to watch. There's quite a few people that follow Kiko's Freethinkers Forum that support the Sherman BluBear campaign, and that's always good to see. You know, developing friendships and relationships down the road. I know I want to give a huge shout out to People's Party of Texas. I don't want to speak for them, but it sounds like from the talks of them, I'm pretty close to them now. We've developed a good friendship, but it sounds like they've endorsed the Sherman BluBear campaign. Everything that I've seen, as far as I'm going to have People's Party of Texas back on next week. So shout out to Athena, OC, Curtis, Jeffrey, everybody for the wonderful People Party of Texas based in Dallas. Um, because I've seen them post a lot of stuff about Jasmine's campaign, and it's really wonderful to see all the different points of view presented on Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. It doesn't matter what my particular personal views are. I try to give everyone a chance to speak their truth and come onto the show and educate the people. I see it more as an educational forum, and so hopefully, if people do get something out of this YouTube channel, subscribe for free. Again, I'm not asking for any of your money. We did get our first donation a few weeks ago, which is wonderful to see. If you want to donate, fine, but I don't expect you to send any of your hard-earned money to me. But hey, subscribing for free doesn't cost you anything. So that's what I would leave with. And I'm going to leave again Tanda's information, episode description, and Jasmine's as well. And I just want to say thank you again for contributing to this great episode 102. And we can't wait to have you back on.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you 100%.
Thank you, beautiful people. Who do we have up next? Not going to tell you because there's too many people to name. So just stay tuned to the show, and you never know who's going to come into Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. We have a lot of great guests lined up down the road. Enjoy your day, beautiful people, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.